People often turn to the government during a recession because of a combination of pseudo-empathy and the tribal instinct to look for the man with the biggest stick for protection. When a recession strikes and people are struggling, they may feel a sense of empathy for those affected, but this empathy often leads them to look for someone to blame or someone who can fix the problem. One of the biggest flaws in human nature is the urge for someone to do something. This tribal instinct often leads to poor economic choices and a pattern of heavy reliance on others to live. This is where the animal instinct of looking for the man with the biggest stick comes into play. People naturally look to those in power, especially those with resources and authority, to provide protection and security during times of uncertainty. The government, being the biggest, most powerful, and oppressive institution in society, becomes the obvious choice for many people to turn to for help. This is why people often look to the government during a recession, hoping that it will use its power and resources to help alleviate the economic struggles they are facing. We saw this during coronavirus. Many asked the government to spend money it did not have and to protect us from a virus it could not save us from. The government responded as it always does, by putting severe limits on liberty and trying to spend its way out of a recession, which only delayed the inevitable a couple more years. In this essay, I'll briefly cover the differences between the three most prominent economic philosophies. John Maynard Keynes. A prominent economist of the 20th century used the term animal spirits to describe the human emotions, instincts, and desires that drive economic behavior and decision-making. He believed that economic activity was not driven by rational considerations and that irrational, emotional, and psychological factors played a significant role in shaping economic outcomes. According to Keynes, animal spirits are responsible for determining the level of aggregate demand, investment, and economic growth. In other words, he argued that the economy is driven by people's confidence, optimism, and willingness to take risks, which can be either positive or negative. When people are optimistic and confident, they are more likely to invest, spend, and engage in economic activities, leading to economic growth. On the other hand, if people are pessimistic and uncertain, they may reduce spending and investment, leading to a decline in economic activity. Although I am not a fan of John Maynard Keynes, he served as director of the British Eugenics Society. He did predict the outbreak of World War II in his book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, and we should give credit where credit is due. Keynes warned that the harsh economic penalties imposed on Germany after World War I would lead to widespread poverty, instability, and eventually another war. He argued that the Treaty of Versailles was too harsh and would have far-reaching and devastating consequences for the global economy, creating a vicious cycle of economic decline that would increase the risk of another conflict. And he was completely correct in this assertion. Hindsight is 2020. Here's an amusing YouTube simulated rap battle between F.A. Hayek and Keynes that explain their economic worldviews. It's educational as well as entertaining. Check out the rest on the American Institute for Economic Research YouTube channel.
F.A. Hayek.
Yeah, we're opposed.
We oppose each other philosophically.
In the same studio.
We've been going back and forth for a century.
I want to steer markets.
I want them set free. There's a boom and bust cycle and good reason to fear it. Play low interest
No,
rates.
it's the animal spirits. John Maynard Keynes wrote the book on modern macro. The man you need when the economy's off track. Depression, recession, now your question's in session. Have a seat and I'll school you in one simple lesson. Boom, 1929, the big crash. We didn't bounce back, economy's in the trash. Persistent unemployment, the result of sticky wages. Waiting for recovery? That's outrageous. I had a real plan, any fool can understand. The advice real simple, boost aggregate demand. CIG altogether gets to Y. Keep that total growing, watch the economy fly.
We've been going back and forth for a century.
Keynes argued that animal spirits are essential for understanding economic fluctuations and for developing effective economic policies. He believed that government intervention, such as fiscal stimulus, could help to boost animal spirits and counteract economic downturns by providing a sense of stability and security. Many modern politicians prefer the ideas of John Maynard Keynes because he advocated for an active role for the government in mitigating economic downturns and recessions. Keynes believed that the government could save us all from plight by providing a stabilizing influence on the economy through fiscal and monetary policies and that it had a responsibility to intervene during times of economic distress. This view appeals to politicians of all stripes as it gives them a sense of self-importance and grandiosity. The reality is much darker. Keynesians spent the past century manipulating the economy into boom and bust cycles by advocating for government intervention in industry and the money supply. The result of government intervention in the economy is decreased market efficiency, inflation, and the destruction of American savings and net worth. The three prominent schools of thought on the causes of the business cycle are Keynesian, Austrian, Hayek, and monetarist economics, Milton Friedman. Keynesian economics, led by John Maynard Keynes, argues that the business cycle is caused by changes in aggregate demand, or the total demand for goods and services in the economy. Keynes believed in the concept of animal spirits, which states that people's emotions and confidence drive economic activity. This idea is flawed, as emotions are not reliable indicators of economic stability and growth. Additionally, Keynesian economics calls for government intervention, such as fiscal policies, to stimulate demand and stabilize the economy. However, this intervention can lead to further problems, such as inflation and market distortions, and may fail to rescue the economy from a depression, as we saw in the 2008 financial crisis, when government bailouts failed to prevent a significant recession. Friedrich August von Hayek. Austrian economists, like F. A. Hayek, believe that the business cycle is caused by central bank intervention in the economy. Austrian economists argue that when central banks lower interest rates, they create an artificial boom in the economy by encouraging investment and lending. This leads to a misallocation of resources, as some investments turn out to be unprofitable. The eventual collapse of these unprofitable investments leads to a contraction in the economy. Austrian economists believe that the business cycle can only be prevented by a hands-off approach to monetary policy. While this approach may prevent market distortions caused by central bank intervention, it can also lead to a lack of stability in the short term. Milton Friedman. Monetarist economists, like Friedman, believe that the business cycle is caused by changes in the money supply. Monetarist economists argue that when the money supply grows too rapidly, it leads to inflation and a boom in the economy. When the money supply slows down, it leads to deflation and a contraction in the economy. Monetarist economists believe that the business cycle can be stabilized by controlling the growth of the money supply. While this approach may provide stability in the long run, it can also lead to a lack of flexibility in response to changing market conditions. The rub. Each of these three schools of thought has its own strengths and weaknesses. However, I believe the government and central banks, such as the Federal Reserve, have far too much influence over the economy. This influence can lead to market distortions, inflation, and bailouts that have consistently failed to rescue economies from depressions. The free market, not government intervention, is the best way to achieve economic stability and growth. In summation, end the Fed.